We're now on Daf Ayin Tes Amud Beis, and we're talking about Rabbi Abba, who would be satisfied for hitching two mules together if he could check out the mothers through these various simonim, and he's going to rely on the simonim because Ein Choshen Lezera Av. But wait a minute, how can you rely on simonim? Simonim is a rabbinic institution, and we're dealing with the doraisa of working kilayim with two different species simultaneously. And the Gemara answers Simonim doraisa. Apparently, he's of the opinion that the Torah itself relies on Simonim. Now, here we have a gigantic sugi about Simonim that, how should I say, that expands throughout Shas, but mostly in Elam Mitzios, if you find a lost object, and the issue whether the Torah relies on Simonim. It would seem that there are three categories of simonim. There's a simon muvhak, there's a simon beinani, and then there's a simon garua, which is a low. Like, for example, if I could tell you that you found this lost object in the middle of Beit Shemesh, that's what they call the Merkaz here, they call it here, that would be a very bad simon. I mean, tons of people go through the Merkaz and lose things. The fact that you found it there is just a good guess. Then you have a simon muvak. If I tell you that you found my sheep and I had made a tattoo on its under its left ear, that's a simon muvak. No two sheep look like that. And then you have a simon beinani between the two. This issue about whether simonim doraisa or lav doraisa refers to the simon beinani. In the simon muvak, everybody agrees that you can rely on simon muvak. For example, you find a get, and you're not sure if you want to return it to Ruvain ben Shimon, who claims that he lost the get. And now, if there is a simon muvak on the get, he could tell you that there's a hole above the letter aleph, on the third line, twice from the left. That's a simon muvak. And now we can give him back the get, and he can give the get to his wife and be mater neshasish doraisa. If, on the other hand, it's a simon garua, then everybody agrees that only the rabbanon under certain extenuating circumstances will rely on such a weak simon. But if it's a simon beinani, then we have machlokes whether doraisa or not. Tan rabbanon, we learned in the braysa. Also vespeno noig b'kelayim u'b'koi. Rabbi Lezer Omer kelayim abba min ha'ez u'min ha'rochel also vespeno noig bo. But koi ein also vespeno noig bo. Okay, so now we have machlokas tanoim whether or not oso vespino will apply in the case of a koi. Let's say the koi is a parent to an animal, and he wants to shech both the koi and its offspring on the same day. According to Rachamim, we have an extension or an inclusion of koi in the Isser of oso vespino, and that would be a violation of the Isser. According to Rabbi Lazar, a koi and its offspring would not come under oso ve'espino. Now, as far as kilayim is concerned, so we're talking about what we call mixas seh, which is a concept that's going to come up in a minute, which means that I don't have to have the same parent species for both parents. So therefore, if I mate an A's with a Rachel, a goat with a sheep, now a goat and a sheep are both included under the Isser of Osav Espino, because Osav Espino includes all animals, all behemos, which means domesticated animals. So both the goat and the sheep are domesticated animals. And it's not like what we discussed earlier about mating, where you have to know exactly if it's the same species. All we have to know is that it belongs to the species of a set. It's a behemoth. What's the case of a koi? Zeh haba min hatayish umin hatzviyah. Now, I'm going to assume that the mother is the tzviyah. Let me just double check that for a second. So again, we're talking about a hybrid produced by a sheep and a goat. No, I'm sorry. Scratch that. We're talking about a tzvia. Tzvia is, I don't know what a tzvia is. In English, they call it a deer, but I don't think that's what a tzvia is. I think the exact translation of tzvia is what's it called? Those those desert goats. You know what I'm talking about? You'll see them if you go on a tiyul. Ibex, I think it's called.
Ibex.
Ibex, Ibex. That's really the translation, I think. But anyway, whatever it is, it belongs to the deer family, which is a chaya. Just one second. So if we're talking about a female deer, then for sure there's Kisi Adam. I'm just talking to myself because we're about to get the sugi of Kisi Adam, because the mother clearly is a chaya, which generates a chiv of Kisi Adam. But now we're talking about Oso Ves Bino. And now we're saying, in this Havamina at least, Hechidami, that Rabbi Eliezer would say that there's no Oso Ves Bino. Ah, yeah, okay, now I got it. Because Oso Espino only applies to behemos, not to chayos. It's just the opposite of Kisi Adam. And if the mother is a deer and a deer is a chaya, then there's no Oso Vespino. So that far we understand. But the problem is that Rav Chizda made another statement, which he committed himself to the opposite position. For Amar Rav Chizda said, "Akol modim behi tzvia ubino tayish shepoter." If the mother is a deer, which is a chaya, and the Isser of Oso Vespino only applies to behema, therefore, since we emphasize the uh, match the mother's yichus, right? The mother's seed. So now we have a chaya, and if we have a chaya, then there's no oso vespino. I mean, that itself is a big chiddush because the father was a goat. Am I correct? If the father was a goat, father of the koi was a goat, then if we hold choshen lezera av, then we have here mixas seh. And if we apply the principle of mixas seh, that means one of the two parents is a behema, then it's included under osav espino. And if we're choshish lezera av and the father was a goat, then there should be a chiyuv of osav espino. And yet, Rav Chizda says that even though the father was a goat, which is a behema, nevertheless, since the mother was a tzvia, and a tzvia does not generate the iser of a behema of oso vespino, so obviously Rav Chizda holds that there's no such thing as se mixas se, and se ubino omer achmana. Right, so it's got to be pure behema, a sheep, a goat, whatever it might be. V'lo tzvi ubino. Now, again, I'm not sure, is he excluding tzvi ubino because the mother is a tzvia, or because there's a mixture here of a chaya, of a tzvi? So Rav Chizda now says that what is the battlefield that divides Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim? B'tzvi haba al ataisha v'yolda. So what's the koi about which there's a machlokes? We're talking about where the mother was a goat, which would certainly be considered a seh, a behema, and it would generate also a but the goat mated with a male chaya, meaning a deer. Kashachet la ulibra. And now we're saying that on this case, according to Rabbi Eliezer in Koi, there's no Isur of Osoves B'no. Even though it was the father that was a deer. And Va'omar of Chizda, Hakol Modim Behi Taisha Ubnotzvi, if on the other hand the mother was the goat, which is Behemah, that's included in Osoves B'no, and the father was a deer and mated with the female goat, and the offspring is now what? Is now the product of a female goat. Then say Omer Achmana Ubeno Koldahu. That there would be an Isur of Osoves B'no, simply because the mother was a female goat. So to summarize the Gemara's kasha, how can Rav Chizda say that koi, about which is a machlokas tanoim, is the product of a goat and a deer, when he says hakol modim, that since the mother is a goat, therefore chaya. So we have a stira in two statements of Rav Chizda. Gemara says, Li'olam, let's go back to our original position. And Enochinami, the father of the Koi, was a male goat. The mother was a female deer. But now we're going to go one generation down. V'yolda bas. So this female deer that mated with a male goat now gave birth to a female. That female is a koi. Ubas, and that female koi, yolda ben. So now we have the mother is a koi, whose father was a goat, but whose mother was a deer, which is not included in Osoves B'no. And this koi was shechted on the same day as its female offspring. Or male offspring, it really doesn't matter. So now let's think about this. How do we define the koi? Is the koi defined as a chaya or as a behema? Now it all depends upon the father, because the mother clearly is a chaya, a deer, which is excluded from Osov Espino, because Osov Espino only applies to a behem, doesn't apply to a deer. But Rabbanan Savri Choshen Lezera Av, which means that since the Kai's mother was, just one second, the Kai's mother, I'm sorry, we're talking about Choshen Lezera Av, right? The Kai's father was a goat, right? Because a male goat mated with a female uh, deer. So if we hold Choshen Lezera Av, then this Kai, whose father was a male goat, is included under Osov Espino. The only problem is that the Torah says Se, and Se would mean that both its parents are sheep or goats. Here, in this case, the father was a deer. No, I'm sorry. In this case, if you hold Choshen Lezera Av, I'm almost there. And now, what are we saying? That, so the male was a goat, which means that from the perspective of the male, the child, the offspring, is included in the Isa Lav Osov Espino because it's behemoth, a goat, but it's only miktzah seh, v'seh afilu miktzah seh. So basically, just to summarize, the Gemara is now telling us that in interpreting Rav Chizda, we come to the conclusion that the Chachamim are going to prohibit under Osov Espino this Kai because of two Lamdasha, halachic principles. Principle number one is Choshen Lezera Av, and therefore the Kai is a product of a male goat. And number two, even though the Kai is also a product of a female deer, which is a Chai and is excluded, but nevertheless Miktzah Seh. Rabbi Eliezer Sovar, Ein Choshen Lezera Av, V'seh afilu Miktzah Seh lo amrina. Rabbi Eliezer is going to reject both these premises. And therefore, the mother is going to determine the species, and in this case, the mother's a deer. And even if you'll tell me that the Kai has a father that's a goat, but nevertheless, that's only Miktzah Seh, and he never accepted that principle of Miktzah Seh. So Gemara now raises the following question: we have an old-time machlokas about whether or not we consider and we're concerned with the seed of the father, and that's the machlokas Chananya and the Rabbanon, where Chananya holds Choshen Lezera Av, and therefore just one second. Right, and therefore, if you slaughter the father and its offspring on the same day, you violate the lav. The Rabbanan say no, only if you slaughter the the mother and its offspring on the same day, because ein choshen lezera av. So why are you going through this whole discussion here in a machlokas about a koi? Forget about a koi. There's a more fundamental machlokas here of Chananya and the Rabbanan, whether the Isa Lav of Osov Espino applies through the Zera Av. In other words, if you shech the father and the offspring on the same day. So our answer is that if they would have just reiterated and regurgitated the old machlokas between Chananya and the Rabbanan about whether Choshen Lezera Av Havamina Baha Afilu Rabbanan Modeh the Sev Afilu Miktzah Seh Lo Amrinon. Maybe in the case of Someone who shechts the koi and the offspring of the koi on the same day, the Rabbanan would agree that there's no Iser of Oso Vespino because they never accepted Seh Umikta Seh. And therefore, even if the Rabbanan are Choshesh L'Zera Ha'av, and the father is a goat, but nevertheless it's only Mikta Seh because the mother is a deer. V'hodesnan. Okay, now we shift over to Kisi Adam. Let's just reiterate. In Kisi Adam, we're talking about a chaya, right? The pasuk says, "V'ish ish sheyotzet tzayid chaya, etc." V'kisa be'ofar, and we're talking about shechting on yont. These are the two topics. Now, let's understand, by way of introduction, that Kisi Adam on Yontif is problematic. I'm convinced that it's only an Isur D'Rabbanan, especially in a case where you prepared it before Yontif, meaning you already dug up the ground, so you have soft ground. You don't have to make holes in the ground and or chop up and grind up the soil, which would be a malacha of tochen. Yeah, that's not a problem. The problem is muktzah, basically. Because to do Kisei Adam, you have to move the dirt. And moving dirt is a problem of Kisi Adam. I'm sorry, of Tiltul Muktzah. So therefore, we want to avoid a situation in which you won't be able to fulfill Kisi Adam. So therefore, Koi ain't Shoktan Osobiyantif. Now it means like that. If you definitely had a mitzvah of Kisi Adam, you know it's a Chaya, then that would override the Isur Tiltul Muktzah on Yontif. Go ahead and shecht your chaya, your deer on Yontif, and eat we call it venison, right? I don't know, gentlemen, did you ever eat venison? I had a student from Mevaseret who treated me to a very fancy restaurant in Manhattan. I think it was called La Marais or something like that. Anyway, so just for the fun of it, he was paying the bill anyway, so I ordered venison. At that point, the small piece of venison cost about $60, which probably today is about $200. Anyway, I was very disappointed. I don't think deer's meat and my body match. Anyway, so he's shechting this koi, and the koi is half deer and half goat. Is you want to avoid this shechita. Why? Because you won't be able to be mekayim the mitzvah, which on one side, if we go based on the parentage of the deer, is chayav dorais, but you won't be able to do that because he's a suffix. We don't know the status of a koi as far as kisi adam is concerned. So better not get into it. Don't even shecht it. And if you went ahead and you shechted it, ein mechasen is domo, you'd have to forfeit the mitzvah of kisi adam, or alternatively wait till after yontif if the dam is still there on top of the ground. But my askina, what's the case? What gives me this status of suffik chaya, suffik behema with regard to koi? If we're talking about a case where the male is a behema, a goat, and the female is a tzvia, is a deer, which is a chaya. In such a case, you should allow shchita, mimonefshach. Either you need kisi and you're allowed to do kisi, or you don't need kisi at all. Bein l'rabbanan, bein l'Rabbi Eliezer, lishchot. V'lichsei. Just 1 second. So now the Gemara is holding tzvi afilu mikzas tzvi. As far as kisi adam, just 1 second. We compare it to Oso Vespino. And in Oso Vespino, we're accepting the principle of mikzas. And therefore, since the mother of this koi is a deer, therefore you need kisi adam. Ella, but rather, what's the case? Right, and again, for the sake of the definite mitzvah of Kisi Adam Doraisa, we override the tiltul muk. So Ella b'tzvi haba al ataisha v'yoldu. So now we're talking about a case where the male component here, or parent of this koi, is a deer, is a chaya, and the female component is a behema, is a goat. And now we manavshach. Either you definitely need kisui, or you definitely don't need kisui. Either Rabbanan holds choshen lezera av, and therefore the father of this koi is a male deer, and a male deer as a chay generates the mitzvah of kisi adam. Is lishchov elise, for the definite mitzvah of kisi adam will override muktzah. The Rabbi Eliezer, and if you're going to Rabbi Eliezer who holds that ein choshen lizera ha'av is lishchov v'lo lichse. Why? Because the mother was a goat, which is a behemoth. So there's definitely no mitzvah of kisi adam. So go ahead and shecht it, and you're not going to forfeit a mitzvah of kisi adam because there ain't no mitzvah of kisi adam. Li olam, says the Gemara, b'tzvi haba al hataisha. So again, we're talking about a case where the father of this koi is a chaya, and the mother of the koi is a behema. We're not going to allow you to do kisui because we're not sure whether we can rely on the zera ha'av. And the zera ha'av in this case would generate a chiyuv of kisui, but if we look exclusively at the parentage of the mother, then we have a behema. So we don't know whether it's kisi adam, then don't shech the animal, because if you go ahead and you shech it, you won't be able to do kisi adam because we'll be choshesh for the zera of the mother. And the zera of the mother is a female goat, which means that it's not a chayib, but rather a behem. The Gemara says, Umidol Rabbanon Mesafke, from the fact that you assume that Rabbanon of Rabbi Eliezer are vacillating back and forth, they don't know whether Choshen L'Zera or not, Rabbi Eliezer Pshitole, then certainly you hold that, then you hold that Rabbi Eliezer is certainly of, without any doubt, Ein Choshen L'Zera Av. And that's why we said in this case, Rabbi Eliezer would not need kisi at all. But we learned, now we get to Zrol L'Chayai V'Keva. These are the matnas kahuna that are given from a behemoth Chullin after shchita to the Kohanim. And that mitzvah, nagim b'koi u'b'kalayim. According to the Chachamim, even if you have this hybrid called a koi, nevertheless you're chayiv to do it. And now we're assuming that since the Torah says, V'zeya mishpat ha'kohanim, me'es ha'am, me'es zovchei ha'zevach, im shoro seven, osam l'kol ha'zrov l'chayam ha'keva. So it says in the pasuk shor oseh, which means we're talking about a behema, not a chaya, not a deer. And now we have a hybrid. And even though it's a hybrid, a koi, nevertheless the Rabbanan are going to say that since apparently, so again, it's one of two things. Either the fact that the mother is a shor or a seh, a behema, that's enough to generate, and we don't care about the zera av, or alternatively, even if we would care about the zera av, we have a halacha of miktas. In any event, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kilayim abomina ezu min harochel chayav b'matanos, bakoi poter min hamatanos. So again, we're going to have to work out all the different possible scenarios here, but the basic rule that Rabbi Eliezer is formulating is that if you have kilayim, then a general case of kilayim, not the case of koi, which is Ez and Rachel, a mating of a goat and a sheep, then we have a behema mimanavshach. from whichever side you look at, the mother side, the father side. You made it a a goat or sheep, sheep goat, goat sheep. We're back to fiddler on the roof. It doesn't make any difference, and therefore you definitely have to give zro l'chayav v'keva. However, in the case of a koi, you're pot. So again, if we just summarize it, then the Rabbanan are saying in the case of a koi, you have to give zro l'chayav v'keva, and therefore you're considering it as sharoseh. And Rabbi Eliezer disagrees, and he says, no, we're going to consider this koi as if it were a chaya and not a sharoseh, and therefore it's not chayav in zro l'chayav v'keva ma'askinu. What's the case? So now we're talking about a case where the behema is coming through the male father of the koi, and if that be the case, then the koi has a mixas chaya because of its female mother, she is a goat. I'm sorry, she is a deer. Especially Rabbi Eliezer kasavar se afilu bepotar kasavar se afilu mixas se lo amrina. So it's not enough to have a mixas se, but Rabbi Eliezer holds you need a complete se. And here the mother is a female deer, and a female deer doesn't generate zro l'chayav v'keva. El Rabbanon. Why do we have a problem with Rabbanon? Okay, nehi de kasaver seva filu mixas se. So what's the Gemara's kasha now? Right. We just came to the conclusion that Rabbanan misafkale, right? They don't know whether we're choshes l'zera av or not. Now, in this particular case, if you hold choshen l'zera ha'av, just 1 second. Just 1 second. Why do you have a chiyuv according to the Rabbanon of zro l'chayav v'keva? If you're going to tell me that the Rabbanon are in doubt whether choshen l'zera av or not, and this koi has a female deer as its mother, and we're not even choshish l'zera av, according to one side in the suffix of Rabbana. So why does he have to give zro l'chayav v'keva? He has a right to say to the Kohen, hey, Mr. Kohen, guess what? I'm not choshish l'zera av. So even though the father was a goat, but the mother of this koi was a deer, and therefore it's a chaya, not a sharoseh, not a behemoth. So Gemara says, Bishleim palga lo yoev lo. So now we get into the whole question of hamotzi mechavel of araya. So I understand very well that half of the zro l'chayav v'keva, let's say it's worth 150 of the 100, he doesn't have to give to the Kohen because the koi's mother was a deer, and that's only half, and a deer doesn't generate. So on half, I understand that he doesn't have to pay to the Kohen, but idach palga. And what about the second half? Is lemolei. He has a right to say to the Kohen, like this is all if we're assuming that the Rabban have a suffix whether the choshen zerav or not. Hey, I see Raya, the choshen zerav. I don't know whether it's choshen zerav. And you want to tell me that since the father was a goat, therefore the koi is included on the behema, and I have to give zol chayavin? The burden of proof is on you. I'm not going to pay you even that second half, because I'm going to assume that ein choshen l'zera'av. And if ein choshen l'zera'av, the mother was a deer, so there's a chaya, there's no chiyav of zol chayim v'keva. So how then, if you assume the Rabbanan on Mesafkele, which was what we proved on the earlier price, then how come the Rabbanan say that you chayav in the case of a kol, you chayav in zol chayav v'keva? Ella, but rather we have to have another scenario. B'tzvi habal ataisha v'yolda. Right, we're going to go down another generation. So what do we have over here? We have the koi, and the mother of this koi in this particular scenario, right? Tzvi haba al hataisha. Right, taisha is a sheep. Well, actually, taisha is a goat, but it doesn't matter. For our purposes, sheep, goat is all the same. So the mother is a sheep. But on the other hand, the father is a male. Right? A male deer, excuse me. Obviously, the father is a male. But the father is a deer. So now we're assuming that the reason why you're chayv in Zol Chayam V'Keva, in this case of a koi, is because the mother is a goat. So Bishlam the Rabbanon, I can understand why the Rabbanon would say you have to give the kohen Zol Chayam V'Keva in this case. Why is that? My chayav b'chatzi matanos. Meaning on half, there's no question. Because the mother is a goat. So you definitely have to give half of the Zol Chayav V'Keva. Maybe when the Rabbanan said Yechayev, they were only referring to that half based on the fact that the mother is a goat. El Rabbi Eliezer, L'chayev V'Kulu Matanos. If Rabbi Eliezer holds Ein Choshen L'Zera Av, then for sure the Kohen has a claim to Zol Chayav V'Keva because the mother of this Kohen is a goat. So Gemara answers, Liolam b'tzvi haba al ataisha v'yolda. Rabbi Eliezer nami yusuf k'masafkelei chayshin l'zera av. Olo. So therefore, if Rabbi Eliezer vacillates back and forth whether we consider the father's seed, then on the tzad that since the father is a deer, and therefore there's no chiyuv of zol chayayim v'keva, therefore Rabbi Eliezer would hold that he's pot. Correct? Let's go back to Rabbi Eliezer. And he says that kai potum in amatonos. And why potum in amatonos? Because choshin l'zera av. And choshin l'zera av means that the father is a deer, a male deer that had a relationship with a female goat. And therefore, choshin l'zera av means the kai is considered like its father, a chaya, and there's no chiyuv to the kai. I'm just not sure why he doesn't have to give half. Let me just, we don't have time for this, but. All right, he says we're going to have to see the next Gemara. That's for tomorrow. But anyway, so the Gemara now asks, "We came to the Rabbanim Misafkalu. So what's the machlokas now? You now finally came to the conclusion that both Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanon have a doubt, vacillating back and forth about whether Choshen b'may pligi. So what actually is their machlokas? What is the subject of the machlokas? And we'll just finish up here on the top of Daf Pei. Beseva afilu b'mikzaseh. Rabbanan savri seh afilu b'mikzaseh. Rabbi Eliezer savri seh v'lo b'mikzaseh. So Rabbanan accepted the principle of mikzaseh. And therefore, in the case of a koi, since the mother is what? Is a goat, is therefore we're going to apply the principle of miktaseh, and we can consider it as a behem. And therefore you're going to be chayiv in zol chayim v'keva. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, we don't hold for miktaseh, and since the whatchamacallit, the father is a deer, a male deer, which is a chaya and not a behem, and therefore he doesn't have to give the kohen is zol chayim v'keva. Okay, I'm just going to read you the last note, and that's that's more than overtime here. The Gemara thought initially to avoid this explanation because nowhere is it explicit regarding this issue. It preferred to explain Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan disagreeing whether we're concerned for the father's seed, because this is known to be disputed by other Tanoim, Hananya, and Rabbanan. At this point, however, the Gemara has no option but to say that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan indeed disagree whether, when the Torah states a law regarding a specific species, such as said, it means that the law applies only to a full-bred member of that species, that's called kula seh, or even to a hybrid that's called mixas seh. So we got up to Rav Papa here on Daf Pei, and then in Mitzvah Shem, B'li Neder on Sunday, we'll get to Pei Aleph. Okay then? So let me wish you a wonderful Shabbos. And we covered a lot. Mitzvah Shem, Be'ez Hashem. Thank you so much.